It's
It
kind
makes,
of
it makes me think of Fat Albert.
hey,
Yeah,
really?
all the kids and you can hear voices.
I guess so.
I don't know that they're kids, but
It will me
anyway,
now.
I always think of Fat Albert when I hear that.
I didn't know you were old enough to remember Fat Albert. Yeah, isn't it a shame that we can't play Bill Cosby anymore? Just because I
Well,
won't,
it
I won't,
is.
I
It
won't play
is.
any of it. I used to do
Yeah.
drop-ins and stuff. And I even had some on the
Yeah.
sports profile because some of it was just. He was a really funny
Oh, he's
guy.
hilarious, but you're right. It's unfortunate.
But I'm not going to promote him. I
Yeah,
mean,
no.
when
Enough
you
of that, right?
when you write down the famous folks who've fallen from grace,
Yeah.
to me he's above O.J. Simpson as far as
Oh,
a fall,
no doubt.
because he was family
Yeah.
to millions
Absolutely.
of people.
Yeah, came in our living rooms every night.
And
every
seemed to
week.
have a moral compass and
Yeah.
all that stuff.
That's
and
too
so,
bad.
yeah.
It's too bad.
How'd you get us started on that?
I didn't mean to.
No, I'm
I
kidding.
apologize.
Hey. No, he did do some good stuff, though. Hey, you were telling me about the front page of the news press,
Yeah.
actually, and I have not
Yes.
seen it today. I did check it out online, but I didn't see the graphs and everything. Of course, school, we're starting the distance learning again today.
Virtual online today.
Yeah.
Mhm.
So dive into this.
Yeah. So yesterday, actually Sunday night, Stillwater Medical released, the Payne County 7-day average, so rolling average, so people could kind of understand why the schools have taken the action and gone the direction that they have. Because we're seeing a very consistent uptick in our numbers, and so in the new 7-day average of cases, yesterday we were at 19.29, Sunday we were at 17.14, Saturday 14.43. It's just we are on this trend, and that is not a good trend.
Yeah.
And I don't know if you saw yesterday or not, but apparently in Enid,
Yes.
there is a major. I think there may be up to 500 students and staff and teachers that are either have tested positive or they're quarantined, and that can happen so swiftly that we just have to be careful. And so, really appreciate, I think, what Mark Moore has done to take swift action. And I know it's, gosh, they only got 2 days under their belt starting the school year. But if we don't do it now, I mean, it could be a lot more complicated later.
Yeah, you talked about Enid. The Enid spike over 500 either positive or quarantine. Masks are required at school, so they are. And I wasn't sure if they were, but they are
Yeah.
required at school. But they're still in school, even though they're deep orange, and all the recommendations that they're getting, not be in school.
Yes.
And so, but they're still going. In an interview with the mayor, Mayor Pankinen, I hope I'm saying that name right because I do know we have listeners in Enid. He says they'll have to consider the mask ordinance again, and also they need to consider going virtual. So it seemed like, and he's not in charge of the schools,
Right.
but it seems like that there's a lot of input there because over 500, and it's been recommended that they go virtual, and they haven't done it. And so if those numbers continue, we'll see what's going on with Enid. But you're saying that's kind of used as a barometer, and everybody's watching these towns, right?
Right. And, just last week, there was a Massachusetts General Hospital that did a study on children and their viral load. The viral load, the infection in children, it seems to be significantly higher. And they'll have a higher level of the virus in their airways than even hospitalized adults that have it. So they're walking around asymptomatic, but they've got a higher viral load, which means they're highly contagious. And so these kinds of things we're learning more about because as time has gone on and they've studied
Right.
kids, that it's believed they're playing a much much larger role in community spread than previously thought. And so I think that's another reason that we are taking the action that we have in Stillwater. And people aren't really paying attention yet to the possible damage to your heart, to your vascular system. If you're only asymptomatic, you may feel like you're not having an issue because you don't feel bad. And we've talked a lot about that, but it's just something that came out recently that kids, they're contagious. 0 to 22, they can still be contagious and be really feel fine. and that's what we're trying to avoid.
Right.
And so hopefully people are being compliant and in these school districts that are still in, and hopefully we'll get back, as soon. If we can get that number down, that average daily, that rolling 7-day average, if we can get that down, that's going to be positive for the schools.
Absolutely. And we were talking, I mentioned this yesterday, when John Bartley was on last Wednesday, he mentioned something about setting the tone from the top.
Yeah.
And everybody has their own way of doing that, but I agree completely in the fact that whether in state, we're still seeing our governor, and it doesn't. I know if you listen to the last half hour, we were also talking about this with the mayor. But when you have the governor showing up at events and still not wearing a mask, that is copied by other people.
Sure,
it just is. And I showed you a picture during a break of this is in my family. It's a niece. This is in Missouri. Their governor is very similar in the fact that he talks a good game and then he shows up and doesn't wear his mask, poses with pictures, no mask. He just not sold on it, and that does set the tone.
Yeah.
Well, I showed Scott a picture, and according to my sister who sent it to me, and she wasn't very happy with it.
Right.
So this is, but it was a celebration of a baseball season that had ended with their kids, and they invited to their house. They have a nice big home with a nice big yard, and they had a party for them, and there were 200 people there. No mask, period.
Yeah.
This is my own family, and so I was talking to somebody. Okay, do we need to have a family meeting about? We love our niece, but don't go see grandma.
Yeah.
How do you, those are discussions that need to take place, aren't they?
Yeah, absolutely. And it doesn't help when, just like this White House report that was released last week, that we find out now has been released every week, or I think it's every week since late June, since June 29th, I believe. Don't know where it's gone. It must have just gone to an office in the Capitol, but for whatever reason, that information wasn't shared. And Will, our mayor, talked about it yesterday. It's very troubling that there's direct recommendations about these things that we've been talking about for months that are not taking place in communities across our state because people don't have the information, and they're not even given the encouragement. Now, I will say, we've had more encouragement in the last 30 days from the governor. He's shown up wearing masks, and that's good. But you're right. There's still these photo ops and things where, it just is, it's not acceptable. And I do think that we've had we're experiencing what we're experiencing right now because of that leadership.
I saw the mayor of Tuscaloosa this morning. This is from yesterday, but they shut down all the bars in Tuscaloosa, by the way. That's where the University of Alabama is. And he says, we are in definite danger of not having a fall. That's what the mayor of Tuscaloosa is saying to Alabama, which would mean if we do play football here, you ain't coming.
Now, do they have a mask mandate in Tuscaloosa?
I don't know.
Do you know? I didn't know.
Well, don't they have one in the state? I think they have one in the state.
They very well may.
I think their governor was and they have a governor that is pretty conservative, I think. And I think the first time I saw her speak, she was very much, we're going to be careful, but we're not having a mask mandate. And to her credit, I believe about a month later, she said I was wrong.
Yeah.
And we've got new data now.
Yeah.
And so they have one in the state.
Yeah. It'd be interesting to know when they did that. If it was around this time that this White House report started coming to the states.
That's a good point.
It would be interesting to know if that was around June 29th.
If it was recommended to them.
Yeah.
That's a very good point, Scott. So,
well, I feel like a broken record some days when we come in here and talk about it, but it hasn't changed. We're not changing our actions too greatly in the state, but thankfully the university is compliant. My wife teaches at OSU, and she feels very good about, students in her classes as well as between classes. People are wearing masks even outside when they're walking from class to class. And I just think that is a great, it's like we've always said we're kind of in this bubble in Stillwater.
Right, yeah.
People want to make it a fantastic community and a great place where people want to live. I think our city council has done a great job of trying to, shepherd us in that direction. And then the university is a great partner in terms of what they're trying to accomplish. with the student body. And it's unfortunate that we had this 3-day event at a bar outside of Stillwater city limits, but hopefully. The numbers of most of those folks were from other towns. I hate to say it, but
Yeah.
anytime you get those groups together like that, thankfully most of it was outdoors, I guess, I understand. But I don't think that we're going to see an uptick for another 7 to 10, 14 days. We just have to wait and see what happens.
And you mentioned you hate to say it, it's very much like Sturgis on
Yeah.
a smaller scale.
Oh, yeah.
But they're going to go somewhere else.
Yeah.
And so
exactly.
that's not going to go away.
That's right.
But you're hoping they didn't come to town afterwards and hang out.
That's right.
And there weren't a lot of. And I forgot who it was. I was talking to somebody that had a college age kid in their house.
Right.
And they said, you're pretty much grown up, but please don't go.
Yeah.
And they weren't going.
Yeah.
And so, but, just that sharing the information is, we'd appreciate it if you just take care of yourself.
Yeah.
I can't remember who that was, but one of my guests here. So.
Yeah. Well, I know it was probably good for our hotels. They've taken it on the chops, just
Sure.
like a lot of businesses in town. And so hopefully they were able to sterilize and not infect their staffs at those places. But anyway.
Yeah. Hey, I'm gonna go back and share a little bit of a conversation I had with you before we went on,
Okay.
because it clears some stuff out that the hospital here is doing, which I thought was
Oh, yeah.
because over the weekend, and I've talked about, we've talked about our parents on this show before. We're both concerned when you have elderly parents that are compromised. Obviously, they're more vulnerable
Right.
than a lot of the population. My mom on Saturday had a fall.
Yes.
And it was a pretty good fall. And so we get a note from my younger sister, and she had gone, and she tries to time this out, and she went to the grocery store. And as it turns out, as she was we didn't know how she fell. Or I didn't, the rest of the siblings didn't. Turns out, as she was putting her cart outside, somebody else was walking. I think she'd already disposed of that, and somebody was coming, so she kind of stepped aside to let them come in. And there was a curb there.
Mm.
And
She
so,
just lost her balance.
and she lost her balance, and she fell flat into her face. No bones broken or whatever, but I think, look, she won't let a picture, which I wouldn't want to see the
Yeah,
picture
right,
anyway.
right.
But anyway, there happened to be a policeman in the parking lot and other people there. Everybody helped her. I think she felt actually extremely grateful, because I talked to her the next day, and she was in a very good mood.
Yeah, good.
But she felt very loved.
Yeah,
because
that's awesome.
people, there was somebody that I knew was a teacher of mine, and she said, "Well, Mrs. Ogletree," and I said, and you're going, first of all, as a kid, you're going, she is still alive, really? But she's probably not that old, Well, she was there, and so she took her groceries. She had some frozen stuff, and she took them to her house to put them and take care of it. So everybody took care of her. They
That's
took her
nice.
to Mercy in Springfield, took her to the emergency room. And but my little sister, when she sent this out and gave us updates, and she wasn't allowed to go in. First of all, my mom's fine. They did a
Yeah.
great job. She does have stitches
Yeah.
and all that stuff.
The love of a small town.
It is.
Yeah,
It is. And Springfield is about 55 minutes away.
Yeah.
And so my sister did, or my mom wrote, told me, I guess, that I think they made very good time. And my understanding was my little sister basically said they wouldn't dare give us a ticket.
Did they get stopped?
No.
Okay, good.
No, but I imagine my mom told her, you need to slow down.
Yeah, right.
And it's like, we're not going to, because she's on blood thinner and stuff.
Oh, yeah.
And so
Yeah.
they were concerned about all these other things.
Sure.
But my sister Lori had to stay outside.
Mm-hmm.
She did stuff like washed her car at the place across
Yep.
the street,
Yep,
stuff
yep.
like that. And you were surprised she had to stay outside. And I thought everybody kind of had those regulations.
Yeah.
Now tell us what goes on here.
So we still are allowing one, visitor to come in or a family member to be with a loved one when they're going through labs or when they're having, X-rays or
Okay.
visiting the ER.
See, I thought that was universal, that what they were doing there. So that's
Yeah.
good to know.
Now, if they're COVID and they're in ICU, that's a different story.
But if
Only
it's like this, if
only
it's a
the
fall-
healthcare provider can go in and see them in that situation, because they're so contagious in an area that's very well ventilated. We've got extra precautions for those areas as well. And they're in an area of the hospital where the public is not going. So it's very safe. And I want to reemphasize that as well. It's very safe if you are coming for labs or because those folks, again, they're not anywhere near where those daily things that we're doing for your labs or
Okay.
X-rays or imaging, ER. You know, those are areas that are not very close to at all to this. So anyway, the point is you've got great care at your access, and you can have someone with you.
Okay. See,
Now that could change.
I know
if
we've
our
gone over
numbers-
that, but
yeah.
I'd forgotten that.
Everyone has to have their temperature taken when they
Right.
walk in the door. Everyone has to have a mask on. You must have a mask on. And everyone has to answer questions. You know, the questions of, have you felt bad in the last 3 days? Have you had a cough? Have you, been exposed? Have you a known exposure? Those are the basic things you have to answer. But we're working on putting a kiosk that will, you'll walk up to, it'll take your temperature. It'll actually dispense a mask if you
Wow.
need one, because it'll say you don't have a mask. So right now that's still a manned feature, but we're working to see if we can get that implemented at the entrances that are open, because the ER entrance is separate from the main entrance, and that's separate from an entrance where you come in if you're having a surgery. So
Okay.
anyway, that's something that we're working on, because it's very expensive proposition for us to man someone at each of those doors to take temperatures and to hand out a mask. So
And even when this, and good Lord willing, this will be behind us sooner rather than later, but we're all just trying to do the best we can.
that's right.
Some of these things are going to stick around and be advantageous in the future,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, I do think it's heightened our awareness.
Yeah.
Whenever it's time for when the flu starts coming around, these same procedures that we're talking about, enhanced sterilization, wearing a mask, social distancing, that should help us with the flu season. You still need to get a flu vaccination in October when those are available. Don't delay that. Don't put that. Don't think that's not necessary. But we do feel like we could have a little lower incidence of the flu just because everyone should be wearing a mask during this time. It's not going to end in the next
Sure.
6 months, we don't think. We got to get a vaccine, and that's just taking some time.
I don't know that I had a cold this year. I didn't have
Good
a
for-
bad cold, which
yeah,
isn't
good
that
for you.
odd? Well,
Yeah.
I normally, you have in
You
the
ha-
spring, I think I've told you, usually about March, when March Madness, and I have a
Yep.
basketball tournament, so we all load up on the cough drops and everything because
Yeah.
everybody's got a little cold.
And so it's probably because you weren't exposed, you weren't out and about.
I think so.
Yeah, yeah.
Because we were more cautious, and
Yeah.
so you realize, well, these things just don't happen to you.
Yeah.
You kind of meet it in the middle and bring it on a little bit, right?
Yeah, and those that are vulnerable, and I want to talk about vaping and smoking for just a minute, but those that are vulnerable, especially if you're overweight, and those are some folks that we are seeing really having some complications. So, but yes, if you've got those comorbidities, if you've got diabetes or a lung
Yeah.
issue, but there was some recent information that came out from a Stanford study about vaping, and you have a substantially increased risk of getting COVID-19, especially if you're a teen or young adult, when you're vaping. So they did a sample of more than 4,000 participants that was conducted just in May, that found those vapors were 5 to 7 times more likely to get infected by the novel coronavirus compared to those who did not vape. And so it compromises your lungs, your capacity, your ability to, take a deep breath. And so just you got to be aware. These folks that are vaping, it's not good for you. It's
And you mentioned for the COVID, that would make them more susceptible to other things as well, right? You would assume.
Absolutely. Yeah.
Absolutely.
So we just need to make sure people understand that you're at a higher risk if you are vaping.
Have some of the rules and regulations changed with that? Because I know the original selling thing was, hey, we're getting away with smoking from smoking, and now you can still have the fun and enjoyment. I never was a smoker, you get a free pass. And then we learned pretty quickly there is no free pass.
Yeah, it's I think it's loaded with nicotine. You don't get the tar and the carcinogens and some of the things that cigarettes have, but it's loaded with nicotine, and that is not, that's just not healthy. So it was kind of promoted as kind of a, hey, this is better for you, or it's not as offensive maybe to people that are walking by or in your same area, but just be aware it is dangerous, and it's damaging your lungs.
Yeah. What else we wanted to make sure we get it? I know exactly what you mean about it, because I feel like that too. In my broken record every morning, and we have different guests, so but you don't. But you also need to get the word out.
Right.
So
Right.
there is this. Okay, which direction do we go? And you need to get the information, and hopefully have not heavy conversations every day. But I wonder about myself too. Okay, am I doing this too often?
Right.
Right.
Right. Well, and there's the mental health aspect of it, and I think that's a big reason why people want their kids in school, and
Right.
and our leaders say we need to have our kids in school because it gives them that social interaction, that connection to their peers, and that engagement that they maybe don't get at home unless they have siblings. And even if they do have siblings,
Right.
remember what it was like when you're around your
Yes.
siblings all the time. So it's one of those things that our community certainly, we want to be back in school. Everyone wants that. So I believe, hopefully we'll see a downward trend and we'll be able to get back to school. But make sure that you do have your child vaccinated, that you have done your well child checks. If you haven't, please do. It's very safe. They're structuring those appointments in a way that is very safe, and it's important. It's very important to get your kids checked out.
It'll be interesting to see what takes place in Enid over the next few days, because I did, in watching the mayor there, I did get the idea. One, I felt he looked like a nice man,
Yeah.
who wanted to do the right thing.
Yeah.
And when he was saying we need to readdress this, and I know since they're one of they said on Channel 4 this morning anyway, they were one of the biggest markets in the state that had yet to do it.
Mm-hmm.
And so with the spikes they're having in their school, I'm sure since they still, even though it was recommended that they stay home, they still decline to. So those meetings are confrontational and contentious, and
there's a segment of the population that wants to disagree with a lot of things, but then there are a lot of folks that want to comply.
Yeah.
And they need the leadership to say, this is why we're doing it. A great example is this past weekend in my hometown of Guyman out in the Panhandle. They had what I think was the 10th largest rodeo in the country this past weekend. It's Pioneer Days. It's normally the first weekend in May. The same.
Right.
It's usually Pioneer Day Parade and the rodeo. It's same time as the Kentucky Derby. It got delayed because of COVID. Well, they went ahead and planned to do it. Well, in the National Public Radio article where they were talking about this report that came out from the White House, the folks out there in Guyman said, "Good gosh, had we known this, we wouldn't have brought hundreds and maybe thousands of people to Guyman
really
for the rodeo this weekend." But that goes back to what I just said. The leadership needs to say, "Hey, guys, this is what we've got, and this is how we're gonna defend it." So, anyway,
well, if you're bearing evidence, there seems to be something wrong with that from a moral standpoint.
Yeah,
I mean, if it's recommended the health of your state,
yeah,
and you say I'm going to hide this and sit on it,
well, or it's not that important, and that's what
Yeah.
it feels like. It really was perceived by, well, you don't need to know this. This is for other people to know. Well,
I think that's spot on, Scott, because when I saw that picture at my niece's house with 200 people there,
mhm.
no mask, these are good people.
Yeah.
For the most part, these are really good people. In their mind, it's not that important.
Yeah.
Because the tone has not been set. And that can be dangerous.
Yeah.
It can be really dangerous.
It can, and we hope that people understand that again, it goes back to what we were talking about earlier. Our community and the university, I think that we're seeing compliance and not as much griping about it.
I agree.
So.
And I love hearing people that I respect, because I do listen to people that they say, well, who do you listen to? Well, find people that you trust a little bit.
Yeah.
And when you hear Norman McNichol cutting the PSA and you see Burns Hargis cutting the video and stuff, those are people that have earned trust.
Yeah.
And have walked the walk. So I think that's leadership.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah, it is. And
will. And I think the mayor has gone out there and put himself out where you're going to take a beating sometimes, and it's for the better good.
Yeah.
And so for our leadership, I think we should be grateful.
And I think those three people you just mentioned, I know Burns-Hargis is a Republican. We talk about how it's not a political thing,
Right.
but those guys are all on board, all three of those that you just mentioned.
Right.
And I don't think any of them are Democrats. They may be, I may be wrong, but I believe they're either independent or Republican,
Right.
those three guys. And so it's not political. It is just the right thing to do.
Right. Well said. So, hey, anything before you go? I know you got a meeting at 8:15.
Yeah, no,
Are you
I
Zooming today?
appreciate it. Yes, we got Zooms and
Hey, be careful with your mute button.
Yeah.
I saw one. Did you see the little thing that, unfortunately for him, Senator Langford was on the call?
Oh, yeah.
And it was actually after this. Now we'll get into storytelling time a little bit. There was a thing last week where Tom Brenneman, who was a Cincinnati Reds announcer,
Oh, I saw that.
oh, and he's cooked. I mean, and it should be, in my opinion.
Yeah, I didn't hear what he said, but I just heard it was bad, and
Yeah, I mean,
that's
it
unfortunate.
wasn't bad language. It was a character.
Yeah.
I mean,
Okay, yeah,
it
that's
showed
unfortunate.
who he was.
Yeah.
Well, on this, it was just bad language. And I even had our boss on, and I could get away with, I mean, I wouldn't want to, but if I dropped something and I said a word I shouldn't, people would go, ouch. But that's not necessarily a character flaw.
Right.
Like the other. Well, on this one, there was one of the senators on this conversation that wasn't really Zoom friendly.
Yeah.
But he did know lots of words that started with F. and finally, I forgot how they were. It was pretty funny because finally they just tell him, you might do the mute button or something like
boy.
that.
Yeah.
And and so you're just going, well, compared to what I just heard, that's okay.
Yeah.
Anyway, thanks for hanging out. I
Hey,
appreciate
you
it.
bet. You bet.